Everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Christina. If you're new here, I am a naturopath, herbalist, life coach, as well as carnivore. And this is a space where I kind of share about my own personal health and my journey, as well as some of the knowledge and information that I have learnt over my many years of working with clients. So today's a bit of an update, and it's been a little while since I've done a video on the page, and that's for a number of reasons. So this year has been an interesting year. Um, my husband has been in hospital for the pretty much the entirety of this year. Now, I won't go into details as to why he's in hospital, etc., because that's his information and he can share that if he wants to. But needless to say, he did not follow my advice, and that has landed him where he kind of is. Um, and so, him being in hospital has meant that that's created somewhat of a stressful situation for me because, again, if you don't know, we have seven children, and they range from 21 to 11. So, in a space of like 10 years, we've got seven kids and four of those are learning to drive. And so I have been the only driver in my family for pretty much all our married lives. And so where we currently live is in an off-grid property. And so we're at least a 30-minute drive into any sort of like town, shop, etc. Like there's no shop between us and the 30-minute drive to get into town. And so with kids that are in that sort of age bracket, I've got multiple children that are working. And so I've needed to drive them to work and be the taxi mum for a bit, as well as we've got a younger group of children that are still doing like homeschooling and that type of stuff that are still fairly dependent. And so that has meant that life for me has been this big juggling act of making sure that I get people off to work in time, making sure that I'm also being able to see my own clients, making sure my younger kids are getting their homeschooling and all of that fun stuff. And as well as, checking that my husband is okay. So, and the other part of that is that the hospital in which my husband is at is a 2 hour drive from our house. So it's a 4 hour round trip to actually, if you go and see him, it's 4 hours plus however much time you're actually there with him, as well as all these other responsibilities that I need to take care of, which has meant that I haven't been on YouTube as much. It also has meant that I haven't been as strict with my diet. So prior to the end of this year, so up until mid-November, I was doing the Lions diet. And what I saw was that was really good for my body. My body really responded well to that. I had to make sure that I was like having extra fat. So I couldn't just eat a steak and have the fat that was there. I had to add extra fat to that. But with that added extra fat, my body was doing super well. And it was really, really happy with that. But with all the added stress of like, I might need to drive somebody in and then I need to be home and then I need to do this. And like with all of that, it became a little bit challenging to just kind of stick to that strictness. And so, I decided prior to the end of the year that over Christmas I was just going to do standard carnivore. And then at the beginning of the year, I would do lions again. And so I did run a Lions group and, I held on during those 30 days of Lions, but it was very, very hard. And it was an added stress that I didn't actually need at that point in time, which meant that it didn't actually work as well for my body because I was stressed and it added to the stress. And the other part of that was that I just didn't have that extra capacity to make sure that I was really on top of my fat needs at that point in time. And so that has meant that things are a little bit more higgledy-piggledy than I would like them to be. Like, in an ideal world, I would be doing high-fat Lions diet and, have everything on point. But I have just learnt that things need to be what things are and just letting them be. And so what I've done is standard carnivore and, utilizing things like cheese and dairy and eggs and all the other fun things as well, just to kind of maintain that standard rather than this super strict version standard. Now, absolutely, my intention would be to go back to Lion's diet, but we also have some other things in the mix, which is towards the end of last year, I really started to get this internal drive that I wanted to go on and do some further study, and that study being in the space of medicine. And so, as it currently stands, I have also gone back to uni. So I am studying a Bachelor of Health and Medical Science at the moment with the intention of then going on to do my doctorate of medicine. So by the end of that, I should be a doctor. Of what? I don't know yet. Like I may specialize in a whole bunch of different things. Like, for example, I absolutely am intrigued with insulin and the role that it affects, like the role that it has on hormones and how it interplays and intergages with all of those things. So maybe it'll be endocrinology. But I also have 7 children. I've had a life-altering pregnancy that left me on life support. And so there's also some interest in gynecology and obstetrics. And so there's lots of interest there. So what I'm really saying to myself is I'm just walking the first step. So at the moment, I'm just doing the first step. And so I've started my classes. I'm about 2 weeks in to this semester, which is about 14 weeks, I think, off the top of my head. And so starting that journey and it's really interesting so far. There's certainly some challenges. Like there's been some challenges already in the sense that I didn't think I would get them until like, further in. But so I just finished a class right now, which was anatomy and physiology. And we're doing microbiology at the moment, which, absolutely intrigues me because that's been a big part of my professional life as a naturopath, looking at the gut microbes and the floras and the opportunistic bacteria and H. pylori and all of the different things that we have been discussing. But the other part of that is the just listening and observing the biased information that is coming through in those that particular lecture, which if you know me on other spaces, you'll know that we had a vaccine injured child in our first pregnancy. We nearly lost her to a vaccine injury, and so that was one of the instigating factors for us choosing not to vaccinate the rest of our children. And again, we've got 7 children. We've got one that's vaccine injured and 6 that are not. And there is a marked difference between those children's health outcomes and issues that we've had with their health or non-issues that we've had with those children. And so it was interesting to listen to the lecturer who clearly has an opinion about what he thinks is the best thing to do, and hearing his biases in it, because he talked about Andrew Wakefield and he's like, talking about how Andrew Wakefield wrote this. He was a gastroenterologist that wrote this terrible paper that said that vaccines cause autism and blah, 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 and that's been retracted, and he was terrible, and he's then caused all these other problems. And I'm like, well, to start with, you actually just interpreted that wrong because if you've actually read the paper, which I have done, the paper did not say that he actually says vaccines cause autism. The paper actually, and there was several other authors to this paper who saw similar things in their own practices. All he was actually saying within that paper was that there is enough question marks here that I think that we need to investigate this further. He actually didn't make a causation and correlation. He didn't say vaccines cause this. He said there is a correlation with what I'm seeing in my clinic with these children who seem to, if you've got autism, there often is a really strong gastroenteritis sort of issues that go with some of those diagnoses, not in all cases. And he was sharing in his clinical practice what he was actually seeing and saying, I think this deems that we should do some more research, that we should just investigate this a little bit more so that we can completely rule this out, or we can see what other mechanisms might be at play here, what might be happening that we don't yet know about. That's actually all the paper was saying. And so hearing this teacher completely discredit him when the information that he was discrediting him on was actually not even the basis of the paper. So that and a whole bunch of other things. So I can see that there's going to be some challenges already. I hadn't anticipated it being quite so early. And I think my frustration was that the particular lecturer was giving a lot of their own opinion. And those opinions weren't like, we're here to learn the science and the facts, not your opinion of those things. Like, yes, you might bring into a question, hey, here's some things that we might need to think about in that particular context. But to give information to first year anatomy and physiology students who, might be doing the course for a whole bunch of different reasons. Some are doing it because they want to go into medicine. Some are doing it because they want to go into dentistry. Some are doing it because they want to go into pharmacology. Some are doing it because they want to go into animal sciences, and so on. So it's a course that's got a large group of different individuals in it. Some of them are quite young, and some of them are clearly much older. And so listening to that and giving his opinion piece was interesting to sit and observe, my own feelings about hearing him give some false information that were then tied into opinion pieces. Like he then went on to talk about how to talk to somebody who is vaccine hesitant and how to tell them that I just trust the science. It was basically what he said, which I had to have a giggle at because I'm like, anybody who understands science knows that we should always be questioning it in order to make sure that we've got the best science, that there's not things that we're missing out on, or if there's new developments, etc., which I thought was hilarious because the other thing that he talked about was H. pylori. So Helicobacter pylori is a bacteria that lives in the stomach. It will shut down your parietal cells once it make acid in your stomach. So then you'll end up with low acid. Then you might go to a doctor because you've got acid reflux. They then might prescribe you with a protein pump inhibitor, which reduces again the acid that's made in your stomach, which actually feeds these bacteria even more because, they thrive in low acidity environments and they love to actually eat the food that you're actually eating. So if you're not eating it, if you're not absorbing it because you don't have very much acid, that's more for them. So they grab and throw. They thrive and grow. And then, what will happen is that they can, over time, develop things like stomach ulcers and then, of course, stomach cancers and those types of things. So they play a big role in that sort of situation. So he then went on to talk about how in South Australia, there was a researcher that decided, or he was a gastroenterologist, who decided that he would grow these things on a petri dish, and he accidentally left it for too long, and then saw that this thing grew. So it grew a little bit slower than other bacteria grew, which is why nobody had found it before. And then what he did was he swallowed it, and then so he had one of his friends test his gas, like do an endoscope and check his gut, and it was all good. And then he swallowed it, and then they did another scope a couple of weeks later and saw, this growth of this bacteria, the Helicobacter pylori. And then he took some antibiotics and he fixed it. And that's how he was able to change the face of stomach ulcer knowledge and so on. And so it was one of those really interesting things that he had this one thing of saying, we cannot question this science. We should just trust it. But on the other hand, he then tells us about somebody who was questioning the science. Because he was questioning the science, he wasn't making headway. People thought that he was an idiot. Then he did this thing, and now he got a Nobel Prize for doing that thing. And it's like, did you not see the disparities there that you have just created? That when you say we can't question the science, you are being those people that that shut down this other doctor that you thought is amazing because he's won a Nobel Prize for his discoveries in Helicobacter pylori. But you are being one of those by saying we cannot question the science, that the science is just there and we cannot question it because it's only through him questioning it and saying, hey, is there something we're missing? And doing something slightly different, that he actually found it and he discovered it. And that's the whole point of science, is that we continue to question. That the more we question, the more we can kind of ask and see and look at the different moving factors that maybe we haven't considered before. So it was kind of really interesting for me to kind of listen and observe those things, but also just pay attention to like what's going up inside of me as I go through that, because it has been one of the things that I have questioned when I have considered doing medicine before is how will I go in these situations? And I think like part of my decision-making process was that one, in some ways, I'm kind of tired of being the end person. Like a lot of people will come to me after they've seen their doctor, their gastroenterologist, their specialist, their this, their that, the other. They maybe have had organs removed. They've done all of these different things. And then I kind of am one of the last resorts that people come to. They're like, my friend told me about you. And yeah, I'm kind of at the end of my rope. If this doesn't work, I don't know what else to do. And I'm like, you know what? I really wish a lot of the time that I was at the front end of that scenario, because by the time they've got to me, they're often in their 40s, 50s, sometimes 70s. And by that time, a lot of the things that like they've lived with pain that they didn't need to live with, or they've lived with labels that they didn't need to live with. Like even from the space of weight loss, for example, if you've carried extra weight for a long period of time, it's almost like it's preset into your head that that's who you are, versus that's something you're living with. And when you're living with it means we can change it. Whereas if it's who you are, it's unchangeable. And so there's a part of me that goes, if I was able to help people at that start end, like, when girls first get their period and they go to the doctor and they say, I've got painful periods, and I was able to speak to them and go, okay, here's some things I want you to try when it comes to your period. And let's look at these other things that are causing the problem, like insulin resistance. Let's test your insulin, see what's actually happening. Let's look at some of the other lifestyle factors, instead of what is often commonly done is those girls get prescribed oral contraceptive pills. And the problem is never resolved because nobody's looking at the problem. They're just trying to mask the problem. And so by the time they go through their life, they then try to have babies. Maybe they can, maybe they can't. By the time they come and see me, they've had this whole life journey that they didn't actually need to have, that had challenges that they didn't need to have, that could have been curtailed. They could have learnt some amazing stuff about themselves and how their bodies actually work and support them along the way if they learnt that stuff early on. And that's part of my decision-making process. The other part of my decision-making process was that my children are getting to the stage where they are far more independent. I have one now that has just got her driver's license, three more that are still working on it. And the other three are, starting to move into the places where they can do some more independent research and study themselves. And by the time I finish some of these courses and I move into the Doctors of Medicine course, they will be, again, even more independent and on their own paths. So timing wise, has always been a big factor for me about whether this now would be an appropriate time or whether another time would be more appropriate. And the other part is also in my life. So I feel like I've reached an age now where um, I say that because I'm a little bit reactive, but also I feel like I'm have reached a place where I'm a little bit more broader in my knowledge and also a little bit more patient, but also able to go, this is a battle I don't need to fight. In the sense of like, I know there are things within the courses that I'm gonna have to write and say. And I know how I now have got the skills to articulate those things, either if I want to just write the paper so that it's done, or if I actually want to bring different evidence to the table for consideration within that paper. So now, for example, if I wrote an article on glucose, I would potentially bring in some of the research of Ben Bickman, for example, and be able to utilize that in a discussion where I might show some different things, which, you know, ultimately I'm going to decide based on like time, energy, resources, what's worth the battle, what's not worth the battle, how can I use that further in my life or not use it further in my life, to actually bring those discussions about and what I choose to do. But I feel like I've reached a place where I can do that now, where I can listen more to other people's opinions. And understand where they're coming from. Doesn't mean that I necessarily agree with them, or that I'm going to take that opinion on, or I'm going to understand, like I'm going to, now take that and hold that as my own. But it means that I can understand them a little bit more and I can listen to them and therefore, maybe bring some good different discussions to the table. So, there's lots of stuff in there that has been a part of that decision-making process. So hold tight. That is what is happening over in this space. So um, still doing all the other things that I'm doing. So I'm still seeing my own naturopathic clients and nutrition clients. And still, I'll still be running programs, etc. Still be doing all of those things, but also on the side, I'm going to be working my way through these modes of study. So you might hear me talk about it from time to time. You might hear me bring something up. I might even come and teach some of the things here on my YouTube about, how different things work. So, for example, when it comes to vitamin B12, vitamin B12 is produced in, well, it's a connection between the microbial life in our gut and a very small part of our actual intestines. So there's only one small part of the intestines that actually convert or absorb the nutrients for B12. So if you would have that removed, you might find it really hard to absorb that. You might have to then have B12 injections for life, for example. If your bacteria is out of balance, then you again may not be able to absorb as much of that B12. If you're not eating the food that's going to contain or convert into those B12 things, again, you might also struggle as well. So I might come and teach some of those things as I move through the programs as well. And yeah, I'll let you know what's actually happening. So that is it for me today. That's a bit of an update. My voice is still recovering because I did have a bit of an infection. So with all the stress with Ben and everything that's been going on, my immune system took a little bit of a hit and I caught an infection of some type. Nobody actually knows what it was, but it was not fun. And so my voice is still kind of recovering from that and so on. So it's a little bit croaky still, but I'm getting there. And so, yeah, that is my update for what's going on for me. For the year, my goal is still to lose weight and continue to maintain a reduction in insulin. That is my overall goal, is to reduce my insulin to a normal level, which is 5 or under, and or a healthy level. Let's put it that way, because like if you look at the allopathic models for normal, that's anywhere up to like 15, depending on the pathologist, like the pathology markers. They're often different for lab from one lab to another. And so those are often around 15. I don't want one at 15, does not serve me. I want one at 5 or under. And so I don't have one on today, but I have got some continuous blood glucose monitors coming. I find them really, really helpful. So if you are thinking about using a continuous blood glucose monitor, if you're struggling at all, I find them really, really helpful because it keeps you honest and it helps you go, actually, well, I really like that. I know my body didn't really like that so much. So it can help you identify some things. Like, for example, if I have a meal that's made up of chicken breast, I'm not going to get as good results as if I eat something that has got a lot more fat in it. And so I might pair some of, like, let's say I really wanted some chicken breast, which I don't because it's like really, I find chicken breast really dry. But let's say I did, I would then pair that with something that's also really fatty to help me balance that out. So the continuous blood glucose monitors can be super helpful for that type of thing and helpful for like what's actually working for you. So I know, for example, that if I have eaten a little bit more protein, for example, versus the fat, then doing some exercise helps me. So it doesn't have to be heavy. Like I know snow walking around a supermarket, for example, will actually kind of balance everything out. Whereas normally if I just eat a high protein meal and I don't do any exercise, then I'm going to see my blood glucose go up a little bit. Whereas if I do some exercise after eating it, it stays the same. And so that's some helpful feedback that I personally have gotten from wearing things like a continuous blood glucose monitor. And it helps to keep me honest and in check. And I really just like seeing what's happening with inside of my body. So I've got some of those coming. I'm looking forward to putting those back on again and testing out some more things to see what I can do in this stage. Because like I am planning on Thursday to do a fat fast, a 3-day fat fast, just to kind of kick everything back into gear. But what I'm trying to do is like during the semesters where I've got study and I've got exams and I've got assignments and things to do, to just maintain like a standard carnivore, but try and find what works best for me in that space. And then over the school holidays where we've got time off or we've got mid-semester break, actually utilizing those to be my, now I'm going to do a little bit more strict work during those periods of time to actually continue to help me with my progress. So I kind of feel like this week is just the first week of starting to really get into a routine because I've just gotten all of my lecture times, all of that type of stuff, know where all my assignments are due, working out like, what times I can take client work and when I can do homeschool work. And I feel like this is the first sort of week that I'm really starting to get into that pattern. So yeah, I feel like things will get a little bit easier from here on in because we'll have more of a routine and a schedule. So yeah, that's where I'm at. If you've been wondering what's been happening, that's what's been happening. There's lots and lots of other little dot points in there that I haven't shared. But that's the overview of what's actually been happening. So here's your update. Let me know in the comments if there's any particular topics or videos you'd like to see me do over this year, because I'd love to do those for you. And if you want to see me as a client, send me a message. I'll happily send you the link and we can book you in and see you from there. All right, that's it for me today. Bye for now. I'm going back to study. See you later.